Hey everyone, it's been a while since my last update, but I haven't been idle. There's a lot of stuff I've been working on. I've pretty much doubled my army since last time in terms of what I have uh, to add to it and what I have built already. I've evolved my idea of doing a straight Gnoll only force into rolling the Gnolls into a sort of an allied race for a human kingdom based around sort of a fantasy Middle East human faction. So, just to get you guys all caught up, I have, and also I've done a little bit more work on each unit of Gnolls. I've added banners that I'm going to be painting the designs on soon. What I'm thinking of doing for that is actually go ahead and grabbing some of the like Sharpie gel pens because I haven't had the best luck freehanding designs in the past, and I'm hoping that that might help me get a little bit more detail and give me some more control while I'm working on it. So that's the unit of Gnoll warriors that were, or Gnoll soldiers rather, that we're all familiar with. Behind that is a unit of human spearmen. Now those are the Gripping Beast Arab plastic infantry. What I did with them is sort of mix in bits from that I had left over from previous projects. I gave them mailed arms and helmets for a few of them, which I had left over from my Anglo-Saxon army that I did a long time ago for, I think, when Saga was first released. For the champion, which I may end up even using as a captain, I could just combine one of the Arab heads with a body from the Frostgrave Knight kit, and I think that he came out looking really nice and will look even better painted up. Also might be using these guys for Hyborian Age, Conan, Robert E. Howard games in the future. I kind of wanted something that would work for more than one game, more than one genre. I've also mixed in some bodies from the Anglo-Saxon plastic infantry that I had to sort of give them mailed shirts to represent the light armor. Now, I guess technically I could have just used the unarmored bodies right out of the box, but I'm a big fan of WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, and if it says they have light armor, I have to represent that somehow. So between the mailed arms, sort of hinting at them wearing some chainmail under their robes, or another thing I did was with the cavalry set for these guys, for the plastic Arabs from Gripping Beast, you get about 12 extra torsos, and these have like lamnar armor, I think that's how you pronounce that, or scale armor. And so what I ended up doing is taking a razor saw, chopping some infantry bodies up at the waist, and then adding the torsos from the cavalry. And I think that produced a nice result. Because believe it or not, there aren't really that many options for armored Arab infantry or armored medieval Arab infantry out there. Especially not that look all that great in my opinion. And this, I'm not entirely happy with what I did. I just kind of elongated his tunic so it looks more like a robe. Then on to the Gnoll Spearmen. I believe I was pretty much done with these the last time I posted. I did add a banner. This is the Goblin banner that I attached, and what I did was I made the banners, the cloth section, out of tinfoil. As you can see, there's a little bit of flaking and a little bit of paint coming off that wasn't touched. I just did a really sloppy first coat there. I plan to go over that again and also do a wash and some highlights before I paint the designs on the and devices on the banners themselves. Now behind them is my unit of human medium cavalry. Again, these guys, they're all Gripping Beast figures, but what I ended up doing was mixing in the Goth Noble Cavalry, that's where I got the male shirted figures from, with the Arab. They're listed as heavy cavalry. I call them more medium cavalry for sure, to kind of get a nice variation and nice mix of figures. And these are just going to be my, using this straight out of the book standard human cavalry for my list. They have the option to have bows, and historically cavalry like this probably would have been armed with bows, but since that's not an oath mark, that's something I just decided to leave off. Next we have the Gnoll line breakers, and these little turds, I spent a lot of time on them. It probably won't show up, but so what I did was, from Green Stuff World you can get sort of these texture plates, and you form green stuff putty and you spread it over the texture plate, and it comes up and it has whatever textures on the plate. In this case, chainmail. Now, the tricky part about this for me was, at first I was trying to do the textures and I just laid out a whole sheet and then let it dry. Don't let it dry before you apply, because there's no way to get it to form fit over the model. So just kind of press it down quickly, make sure the texture sheet's nice and wet so the green stuff doesn't stick, then immediately apply that to the model. Then, so let that first section dry before you go ahead and try to add other sections, because if you try to do all the sections at once before one section dries, what you'll do, or what I would do, is you're holding onto the model, trying to keep it steady while you put the new section into place. You'll end up putting your thumb on the section you did previously, and that wipes away all the texture. So I did kind of want to do helmets on these guys, but by the time I got through doing like 20 of these, I did a test sculpt. I just was not happy enough with how the helmets were coming out to even bother doing it. Now I also included, as conversion bits, these are shoulder pads from can't even think of the name, Anvil Industries. They usually do mostly 40K type bits, but these worked out. I had these lying around. I think I was actually going to use them on my Warhammer Dwarves at some point to kind of up armor them, but the Gnolls got them first. And then to give myself some more variation in the type of two-handed weapons the Gnolls were running around with, instead of just the two axes that come in the plastic box, I converted some flails using the flails from the Fireforge Knight Templar box. I just cut off the head of the Gnoll spear, attached them, and I think it looks pretty good. It looks pretty natural. And flails are, a traditional weapon for Gnolls. I think it's their favorite weapon, if you go all the way back to original D&D. And I think that looks pretty good. I also got the Barbarian box, which I plan to do something more with in the future, but I also used it to just kind of give some variation to the two-handed weapons that the gnolls will be running around with. Now the standard bearer, the standard itself and the arms come from the Ungor kit from Games Workshop for the Beastmen. I think it looked sufficiently nasty and intimidating to be sort of like, though it doesn't exist in Oathmark, the army standard. This is going to be the general's unit or the leader of the gnolls unit, so it's fitting that it should be an impressive sight. And then also for the musician, I used again the Ungor arms, which are a little bit bigger than the arms that come with the gnolls themselves, but I think because it's an elite unit, it's not that noticeable. Behind them is what's going to be my unit of a unit of human militia. Now I'm arming them with spears. One, because there's not really enough of anything else in the plastic kit itself to arm them with something other than spears. Two, if and when I plan to use these guys in a historical setting, basically all infantry would have been armed with spears at this time period, and nobody really went to battle sword and board. It was, sword was a sidearm. It's not something that you would be running around with as your primary weapon. And if you're just kind of getting conscripts together, it's much more effective to say, here is a very long, sharp, pointy stick. Stand behind that and this shield and stop the enemy from getting through, than it is to try to teach them how to use a much more complicated sword or other type of what would be called in wargaming terms a hand weapon. And I also saw on Facebook there was somebody throwing out rules for arming human militia with spears. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to actually use those rules or just say they have spears but they don't have brace. I'll need to get some games under my belt before I make a decision on that. And again, the champion of the unit, the leader, the officer, is made from a converted Frostgrave Knight. Not quite as happy with him as I was with the other, but he still looks pretty good. And I'm waiting to get some musketeer miniatures from Footsore North America to kind of give me more variation in my command. Rather than just giving every unit a trumpet, I ordered up a drummer for the musician that's going to go there, and another metal standard bearer, so every unit will have a little bit of its own character. Then going this way, so this is a Reaper Pathfinder miniature. So it's Reaper licensing for the Pathfinder game system. This is a genie binder. And this fits in, this guy, when I first saw him, I thought that was an awesome concept, because it's like, how do genies get in lamps anyway? There's got to be somebody putting them there, and it turns out that this mage is going around and binding them up, and you can see he's got chains, probably magical, he's got a lamp ready, he's got some keys. Just a very characterful figure that I think, given what other units I plan to add to my army, fits really well. And as I put on the forums, or not the forums, but rather the Facebook and Discord, I'm sort of going for, like I said, a fantasy Middle Eastern Arabian vibe for my kingdom. Iram is the name of my main city, City of Pillars. I plan on with the territories I took, it's really going to be magic centric. There'll be, like magic academies. Now, I know that high level magic users aren't all that great in Oathmark, but it still gives me some flavor that I really enjoy playing around with, and what that can open up narrative wise and story wise for me. Now here is, for example, this is an Ifrit figure from Mantic Games. I believe it's from their Abyssal line, so it normally would hang out with demons, but for me, I'm using it as an Ifrit, and it's going to be a counts as corpse fire. So, I mean, it'll be going around the battlefield, throwing jets of fire, and I do think that this is almost a perfect fit for including that sort of monster. The corpse fire really fits it. I with the exception of maybe Unthinking, I don't think there's any rules that don't really work to represent what an Ifrit would look like in my mind. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then over here, we have stuff you guys are pretty familiar with. My hunting pack of hyenas. Behind them are my Flyns, I'm going to call them, even though that's technically not what that would be classically in a game of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm using them as sort of like overgrown, demonically infused gnolls. I plan to get some conversion bases for them to put them to make the unit outline square and proper for Oathmark. Behind them are what I'm going to be considering my nomad archers. They're going to count as rangers. I'm going to be putting together at least 10 more of those guys. They come from an oasis just north of my main city. They sort of protect the trade routes and raid them as they're, as the mood strikes them. And again, I just made these guys with all the wrappings and like heavy turbans on to kind of denote that they're out in the desert and out in the wilderness to protect, and they need to protect themselves from the elements. Didn't use any armored bodies on them. Again, rangers don't have armor in the rules and their stats, so, and moreover, if you are a nomad out in the desert, you don't want to be wearing a whole lot of armor because that gets hot really fast. And then behind them, I picked this up at one of the local hobby stores. It is I believe it's a WizKid Manticore. I don't know which one of their plastic ranges it comes from. I think it's the D&D one as opposed to the Pathfinder one. But again, those games are more or less interchangeable. Rules-wise, I'm probably going to go with a Lenorum for him, just to represent that he's a big, mean, angry, flying beastie, with no breath weapon or anything. Ideally, I would probably want to come up with specific rules for Manticores at some point, but it's not something that I feel all that strong about. And I decided to go with the Manticore as a big meanie for this army because, or my thought is so you have the gnolls that are kind of like a magical hybrid of man and beast. The Manticore, also a magical hybrid of man and beast. Down the road, I'd also like to get a unit of WizKids also does Luricata, which are kind of like hooved hyena badger things that are mythological monsters. Grab those up, use them as giant wolves to add to the gnolls. Again, mythical sort of hybrid monsters. Kind of the story in my head is that these were all leftover experiments from the previous empire that existed before the marches became wild. But anyway, that has been my progress so far. Hopefully I'll be able to bust out a lot more soon. I am looking forward to talking about and finding out more and thinking more about the worldwide campaign that everybody's been planning. I've also got my kingdom posted up on the Grand East main map, so if you want to take a look at that, I think there's links in the Facebook as well as on the Discord. If you have any questions or any ideas or tips, I'd really like to hear from you guys. I love talking about this stuff. You know, it's got my noggin jogging. If there's anything you think I could add that would be fitting, or just anything at all, leave a comment and I will talk to you next time. Bye.